Death at Gallows Green, Chapter 33. Tell me, what sort of match is it? An unspeakable match, my dear, utterly abominable. It has turned his mother's hair silver and made his father into a pallid wretch. But could no one remonstrate with him? Could no one dissuade him from his intention? Sadly, no one. The affair is an absolute tragedy, and it bids fair to sink the whole family. Beryl Bardwell, Amber's Amulet. True to his word, Bradford Marston placed his mother's emeralds in her hands the next morning, immediately upon his return on the early train from London. "Thank you, dearest mamma," he said, "for the loan." Lady Marston, still in her bed with a lace shawl around her shoulders, tried to hide her relief. She had not wished to let Bradford have the emeralds, but he was her only son and dearest joy. Her mother's heart had been touched, and she had offered to help, but impulsively, without fully understanding what was needed. That she had been sorry afterward was not something that she wanted him to know. So she only said, in the acerbic tone she used to mask her sentimental feelings for him, "I hope, Bradford, that you have learned your lesson." With a toss of his head, Bradford gave his usual insouciant grin. "I have, dearest mamma." He sat down on the edge of her bed and reached for her hand. "At any rate, there will be no more need of loans. You will be glad to know that I have come to a decision about my marriage. The lady in question has ample fortune, which should be quite an adequate supplement to my own." Lady Marston's hand flew to her heart. Like every other mother, she had longed for the day that her only son would wed, should make a match that would not only bring him happiness, but bestow honour and fortune upon the Marston house and perpetuate the family name and title. To that end, she had scrutinized all the great families for suitable candidates and studied each acceptable young woman who was presented during the season. But even though she had identified 3 or 4 promising candidates each year, as many as 5 or 6 in a good year, none had suited Bradford. Their hair was wrong colour, their teeth were crooked, or they could not dance, or they laughed too often, or not often enough. Last year, when he attained his 30th birthday and was still a bachelor, she had almost despaired of his marrying. But of course, that was impossible. He bore the responsibility for carrying on the Marston name. He had to marry, and she was delighted, indeed jubilant, that he had chosen to do so now when Eleanor was safely wed and she could devote a mother's loving attention to the nuptials. "Bradford, my dear," she exclaimed, seizing his hand and bringing it to her cheek. "How very wonderful! Oh, how do tell me, is it Miss Powlett?" Lady Hermione Powlett, the charming daughter of Lord and Lady Powlett, had been her favourite candidate this season. Lady Hermione and her gracious sister, Lady Ulrica, had been going about with Lady Dana, wife of Sir George Damer, who had been so long at the Foreign Office. Lady Hermione was remarkably pretty, with violet eyes and pale gold hair, and her ball dresses were an absolute wonder. Lady Marston had fastened her maternal hopes upon Lady Hermione the moment she saw her. Bradford's glance was teasing. "No, mamma, it is not Miss Powlett. Guess as you like, you are not likely to discover the lady's identity. It will be a complete surprise to you." "Then it must be Miss Dyke," Lady Marston said decidedly. While Lady Powlett might have been a better choice, she could feel no disappointment, for Miss Madeline Dyke was one of the Queen's maids of honour, quite intellectual, it was said, and certainly the possessor of a pleasant face and figure and fortune, her own, in addition to the £1,000 dowry bestowed by the Queen on her maids of honour. Miss Dyke's dresses were not the equal of those of Lady Hermione, but they were quite nice, and she danced most delightfully. Bradford leaned forward and laid his finger gently on her lips. "No, mamma," he said, shaking his head. "Please, conjecture no more. The object of my affection, the lady who has won my heart, has no connection with the court, and none with society. You're not likely to think of her when thinking of a match, although I am sure you will believe, with me, that it is most suitable." Lady Marston stared. "No connection with society?" "That is correct, mamma." Bradford sat back and stroked his blonde moustache with a pleased expression on his face. "She is in fact your own near neighbour. Now can you guess her name?" "My own?" Lady Marston felt herself go pale as a searing pain lanced into her heart. "Indeed, mamma," Bradford's smile was triumphant. "She is Miss Catherine Ardley of Bishop's Keep." "Miss Ardley!" Lady Marston cried. "Miss Ardley! Her voice rose into a shriek. "No, Bradford, no, not Miss Ardley." At that moment the door opened and Eleanor came running in. "What's happened?" she cried. "I heard a cry. Is there a fire?" "No, no fire, sister," Bradford said. "I've just told Mamma of my intention to marry Miss Ardley, and—" "Oh, no, no," Lady Marston moaned, pressing her hands to her heart where she appeared to have been wounded mortally. "Not Miss Ardley, never!" Bradford stood, frowning. "Really, Mamma, there's no need for hysterics. Miss Ardley is Irish," Lady Marston cried, opening her eyes wide in agony of loathing. Eleanor frowned. "No, Mamma," she said, "she is an American, and American women who have married into the best British society. Your own dear friend Lady Churchill, for instance." "We are not speaking of Lady Churchill," Lady Marston cried, clutching at the counterpane as if it were all that shielded her and hers from the direct onslaught of 1,000 mad Irish. "We're speaking of the common Kate Ardley, who was brought to Bishop's Keep to be her aunt's secretary." Eleanor's face darkened. "Mamma, you are being utterly unreasonable. Miss Ardley is an uncommonly fine—" "Eleanor," Lady Marston said cuttingly, "you are to stay out of this. I have observed Miss Ardley worming her way into your friendship by the devices of flattery and ingratiation. Your perception of this affair is not to be trusted." Bradford's tone was stiff. "Am I to understand, Mamma, that you oppose—" "Oppose!" Lady Marston pulled in a gasping breath, clenched her ringed fingers and steadied herself. Over the years, her only son, her dearest boy, had given her much cause for grief. But nothing he had done in the past held as much potential for future disaster as this. It was incumbent on her to deploy whatever force was needed, to use whatever ammunition was required to deter him from this folly. She weighted her voice with all maternal authority. "I do more than oppose this match, Bradford. I utterly forbid it. You certainly know that she allowed her cook to ride in the Ardley carriage." "Mamma," Eleanor said patiently, "I have told you. That was a special occasion. Miss Ardley does not, as a matter of course, allow the servants to—" Lady Marston swept on. "And you have not heard that she goes out in bloomers and rides her bicycles in the public lanes." Bradford's mouth quirked. "I've also heard that the Countess of Warwick, the Princess Daisy, wears bloomers and finds them extraordinarily comfortable, and that she has ridden her bicycle on Rotten Row." Lady Marston perceived that she had made a strategic mistake. She had not put the matter in its strictest terms. She straightened her shoulders and chose a better angle of attack. "I say again, Bradford, I forbid this match, as would your father should you dare to mention it to him. I advise you, if you value his high estimation of your judgment and hope for his continued generosity, that you banish Miss Ardley from your mind. She is utterly unacceptable." "But, Mamma," Bradford said, "you are not accurately assessing the advantages of—" "There are no advantages in this match, Bradford." Lady Marston's voice was steel now, her words as ice, and she brought up her big gun from the rear. "Surely you have heard the wretched tales that are told about her." "Tales?" Bradford asked. "What tales?" Eleanor echoed. Lady Marston lobbed her last but best shot. "That the despicable woman is wed to the village constable." Eleanor gave a little shriek. Bradford seemed stunned. "You're sure of this?" he asked. "Utterly," Lady Marston lied. "I have it on best authority. They are to be married within the month. There, does this not reveal the sort of low, uncultured person she is, whatever foolish hopes you may have squandered on?" But her salvo had hit home. Bradford turned on his heel and left the room.